Youngman Brown here. Today's episode is part one of my conversation with Li Chen, the creator and artist behind Exocomics, or Extraordinary Comics. I've had a lot of fun during a lot of these interviews, and this was definitely one of them, so it naturally stretched on longer than usual, but I'm so glad it did, and I think you will be too. We talk about a lot of fun things, including Patreon, imposter syndrome, cringing when you look back at your old work, and of course the fact that geese are dicks. But I don't want to spoil it all for you, so without further ado, here is part one of my conversation with Li Chen. Your Creative Push, episode 82.
I definitely want to, for my whole career, want to look back at my work and cringe, because that can only mean that I'm progressing.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I am your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Li Chen. Hailing from New Zealand, Li is the creator of Extraordinary Comics, or Exocomics, which is a weekly slice-of-life webcomic based on her life with her partner Jordan and her cat Shoelace. With her fun and quirky comics, she has gained a steady following of fans and supporters and has published 3 collections of her work. Li, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I was wondering if you could tell me what I missed in that intro and maybe give us a peek into your personal life?
Thanks for having me. That was such a nice intro.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. What have you missed? I like to make miniature models. I really like Lego.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I just draw a lot. I mean, what you said is pretty much spot on. I just do a lot of drawing, make a lot of comics.
Very cool. I was wondering, could you take us back to maybe a little bit before when you started Exocomics and kind of what made you actually start doing it?
Yeah, so I guess I have a slightly different story from a lot of other people that I know that make comics. I didn't actually read comics as a child. I actually only recently started reading comics, but I've always really enjoyed drawing. I've always found it kind of interesting how all kids draw, and then some kids just seem to grow out of it, and I just never did. I just continued drawing, and I guess probably drew less in high school and university because, you know, I was focusing on studies, and then after I graduated from university, I couldn't find a job for a long time, and so my partner Jordan just said, you know, well, why don't you start a comic? So before that, I'd never really done anything like that before, just like to draw and like to doodle, yeah.
And did you have any kind of hesitancies, like seeing as the comic is, you know, kind of a peek into your life? Was there any fears about putting yourself out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing about my comic that I guess doesn't make me worry that much is because it's quite light, and a lot of it is quite surreal. So,
right.
You know, there are times where Lee and Jordan go to space and things like that. So,
Yeah.
not too worried because I've never actually been to space before. But I like that a lot of people can relate to it. I think that's the thing that I like the most about it, that you can just make like a little funny thing and people all around the world can look at it and laugh and relate to it. I think that's really cool.
Can you talk a little bit about Kickstarter and Patreon and kind of how that helped to kind of springboard the comic?
Yeah, so I started the comic in 2009, I think, and I've been doing it for a while and gaining some fans, and people started asking if I would be printing my comics into books. And it was something that I wanted to do, and whenever people emailed me and asked, I'd always say, yep, that's definitely something I'm interested in doing, but I really had no idea where to even begin.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have no background in graphic design or book design or printing or publishing or anything like that. So I think I always sort of thought that I'd have to wait until, you know, someone with authority would contact me about it, you know, like a publisher or something like that. And I think that's where attitude is changing a lot with sort of Kickstarter and Patreon, that if you want to do something, you can just sort of go out and do it yourself and self-release and self-publish. And I think that's really awesome. So in 2012, I used Kickstarter to publish my first 2 books. I didn't really know how it was going to go, but the good thing with Kickstarter, I think a lot of people know how it works, is that if you don't get the money or if you don't raise the goal, then no one loses out. So you don't have to worry about, losing a whole bunch of money to it. So I thought, well, I'll do it, see how it goes. We'll just see. It's a bit of a fun thing. It'll be fun. If we get the money, great, but chances are we probably won't. So we were asking for 35,000 US to print volume 1 and 2 of the books, which each contain 100 comics. And we actually reached the target in 4 days into our campaign. Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. So the campaign ran for the standard Kickstarter amount of time, which I think is about a month. And by the end of the month, we'd reached about $66,500, which is really,
oh my gosh,
yeah, really, really crazy. It was a really amazing and challenging year of my life, just going from never doing anything like that before to having published 2 books and then actually going to a library and seeing them in the library like real books. It was really crazy. Yeah. And also that was the year, well, once I reached my target, I realized that I would probably need, at least sort of a few months to design the books, get them printed, and then get them like freighted and shipped to everyone. So it was the same year that I decided to quit my day job and do this full time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really, really scary. Yeah. It's not something that I think I would have done otherwise, because I'm quite a reserved and sort of conservative person, I think. The idea of just quitting my day job without really knowing what's coming next was very scary, and I don't think I would have done it if Jordan my partner hadn't, encouraged me. He was kind of like, you can do it, but I was just like, oh, I can't do it. What am I going to do? What if I'm unemployed? What if I end up homeless? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, congratulations. By the way, it's a terrifying thing, and I think that it's for any creative person that does it on the side, which is a lot of people listening now. It's always on and you push it back in your brain, like, oh, maybe I could do this one day full time. And I think it was really interesting that you said that you're almost waiting for somebody of authority to come and offer it to you.
Yeah.
So what is your advice then to somebody who is also thinking that they need that authority, that maybe does have a bit of a fan base that is maybe starting to toy with the idea of kind of taking the leap?
I was just talking to my partner about this last night. The thing I find interesting is that I think the thing that's always held me back is my mindset about the sort of so-called authority figures or people that can tell me that I can do the thing that I want to do. Because I think it's hard when you're in a creative sort of industry. Like, for example, if you decide that you want to be a doctor, in high school, you would, study the sciences, you get good grades, you apply for university, and they accept you, which is your first sort of, approval from an authority figure that, yes, you have the prerequisite skills that we're looking for in a doctor. So you already know that you could potentially be a doctor. Then you go to university and you study for 5 to 10 years or whatever, and you shadow real doctors, and then you pass the exams. You do all the work experience, and you have all the certificates which say that you can be a doctor. And I think that's something that I always wanted. It sounds really weird. Like, I wanted someone to be able to tell me, yes, you're a comic artist now, or yes, you're an artist now. And I guess it's kind of strange to have that sort of placed on yourself, that you can say when you're an artist, or you can say when you're a comic artist. And that is kind of a strange feeling. But it took me ages to realize. It wasn't until I was actually sort of doing it full time that I realized you can just do it and just say you're an artist now. Even when I quit my day job and I would meet people, new people, and they would say, oh, what do you do for a living? I would always say, I'm a comic artist, and sort of
in a question.
Yeah, in a question sort of voice. And they would sort of give me a weird look, like, she doesn't know what she's doing at all. And I think, if you want to be an artist or a comic artist or a musician or anything, or a writer, you just have to start doing it. I mean, that's the only thing that separates you from people who do it professionally.
Absolutely. It's so funny that you say that. I was thinking about that recently too. When 4 months ago, before the podcast started, I would start telling people about it kind of like this too. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking of starting a podcast about, creativity. And it's funny, like, and now I say it confidently, like, yeah, I have a podcast and it talks about, I interview artists and writers and musicians about creativity, and it helps to inspire people to do it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
the act of actually doing it. You go through this like orientation type of thing,
Yeah.
where then once you're smack dab in the middle of it, then you can say it with more confidence. And it goes back to that idea of like, you're the one, it's all about you and your psyche and your permission. You're the one that gets to say what you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I still have days where either I get asked to interviews or talks, and I feel like an imposter. Like I feel like I'm sort of
Mm-hmm.
duping them, and like I feel like saying, "Do you realize I don't know anything? I just started drawing one day, and this just happened. I don't actually know anything. Like I didn't. I feel like I didn't start the legitimate way, whatever that means, because that doesn't actually exist. I didn't go to comic making school and graduate with a pencil in my hand, or it's just something I decided to do one day and just did it. And I think that's just what you need to do if you want to get something done.
Absolutely. Just sneak in there,
Yeah,
just just
definitely.
find your way to get in there.
Yeah.
That imposter syndrome is definitely prevalent, and yeah, I don't think you quite do ever get over that, because you're always going to strive to be better, and it's always that confidence issue, like
Mm.
where you don't feel like you got there the way that you're supposed to be, with some team of people calling you up saying, "Hi Lee, like we love your work, and now you've made it." It's never like that, so I love that. With all of the comics under your belt now, it's been what you said, since 2009, and 419 I think came out today,
Yes.
as of this recording. Have you noticed like kind of a change in your style over all those years and all those comics?
Oh, definitely. When I look at the old comics, it makes me cringe how terrible they
Really?
are. Yeah. I think everyone does that, to their own work. You see
Sure.
your earlier work and you see all the flaws in it. Yeah, I look back now at some of those earlier comics that perhaps aren't very good, especially not drawing wise. And I always joke that I feel grateful that I had a layer of stupid sort of protecting me, where you don't realize just how bad your work is. And that's so good, because I think that prevents you from getting frustrated and demotivated. So I think back then when I was making the terrible work, I really liked it. And at the time I was like, yeah, I'm making this thing. It's really, really cool.
Hmm.
And if I knew then how bad I'd think it would be now, I don't think I would have continued. So I definitely had a very nice force field of stupid protecting me.
Force field of stupid.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because I went back and I looked at your original ones, the OGs, number one, number two,
Yeah.
etc. And I really connected with them, especially because I feel like seeing those, you can kind of see why you created it. You could kind of see the moment with you and Jordan, where you could almost tell that was a moment that you kind of discussed. You're like, I should make what we just talked about into a comic, or like my cat, your cat, protecting its food from you when you're dressing up as a cat or pretending to be a cat, like you can kind of feel those moments. And I totally get it, because I'm the same way with my writing, and even with this podcast, only 70 episodes in, I cringe when I go back and listen. But I think it's really important to do that, to ship it, to put it out there so that you can start to progress. And then I think it's a beautiful thing when you're a few years down the line and you can look back and cringe at your old work.
Yeah.
That means that you have progressed, instead of just sitting and not doing it. You look at where you've come,
Yeah. I definitely for my whole career, want to look back at my work and cringe, because that can only mean that I'm progressing. And I think that's the thing that sort of holds people back when they first decide to do something creative, is that they have this vision of where they want to be, and maybe their skill set when they begin isn't quite there yet. and then they get frustrated and stop. And you just want to say, you can't stop, because then you'll never get there. You just have to keep chipping away at it, keep practicing, and then one day you will be good.
Right. Once you stop, that's where the progress bar kind of stops.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll never get to 100%. I don't think anybody ever gets to 100%.
No.
It kind of, I think the bar keeps kind of moving.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is definitely a good thing. Yeah.
So, how long does it take you to create each comic?
It takes me quite a long time, surprisingly. Like they look quite simple, but it actually takes me quite a long time to do them. I draw them by hand with just with pencil and paper, and that takes me about anywhere between sort of 2 and 4 hours, depending on how complicated the comic is. And then I scan it, take it into a Photoshop, and then I have to clean it. I probably could take less time if I was just more proficient at Photoshop, but I just sort of go through and clean it painstakingly, bit by bit, and adjust things, put the text in. I draw the text and things on a separate bit of paper that I overlay so that I can sort of play around with it at the end. So it does take me quite a long time to do. Quite a long time, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the things with any type of creative work, even if it does seem simple, which I don't think that yours do. I think they're beautiful and yes, like kind of simple in execution, but you can tell that it would take, a bit of time. But I think especially when you get into creative things, whatever it may be, it always ends up taking like double the amount of time that you think it should take. And things always kind of come up. How long does the idea part of it take? Do you have like kind of a queue of ideas, or do you each week think of a new one?
Well, each week I try to spend at least sort of half a day at the park. So there's a park sort of close to my house, and I walk there with my sketchbook, and I just sit down and sort of draw whatever comes to mind. And during one of those sort of sessions, I'll come up with maybe 1 or 2 ideas, or sometimes no ideas. But I just have to go and not have any sort of pressure and just think, I can just draw whatever I want. And even if I don't come up with anything, I try not to think of it as wasted time. It's just time for me to be creative and just sort of think and draw whatever I want.
Yeah, not time wasted, because you just spent your day drawing in a park. Like, that's the nuts. That's the best.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's frustrating because at the same time you think, well, this is nice, but we're here to do work. So, I'm going to be at the park for 2 hours. I want to come up with at least 2 ideas. It'd be nice if it worked like that, but obviously brains don't. So you kind of have to trick yourself into thinking, this is almost tricking your brain into thinking you're not going to do any work. So you just kind of go, brain, we're just going to go for a walk today. And your brain is like a dog, and it's like, oh, okay, let's go for a walk. And you go, great, okay, let's just sit
Should I get the
down
leash?
for a bit. Yeah. And then you go, let's sit down for a bit. And your brain goes, oh, okay. And you go, oh, let's just draw for a tiny bit. And your brain goes, okay, I'll draw for a bit. And then you go, you don't have to think of any ideas. We'll just draw. And your brain goes, okay. And that's when the ideas flow. I think when you're very rigorous about it, and you think, brain, now's idea time, go. That's when your brain goes, and sort of can't come up with anything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's overwhelm for sure.
Yeah.
I love that way of thinking of it, like kind of treating your brain like a pet, easing it into and tricking it into going for a walk almost, because that's a very prevalent thing that's discussed on this podcast.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, not taking your brain for a walk, but trying to get over that, okay, I have to create in a very like structured, all right, now it's time to create. Like I have to get in this mode. So I love that idea, especially when you're going outside, literally, because that's what usually you have to do to get an idea when you're sitting in front of your computer trying to think of ideas. All right, I need to go refresh and go out for a walk. I don't know. I love your approach to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also when you go outside, there's a lot more sort of stimulation. Like, there's other people that you can watch. There are animals, there are cars, and, you go to the park and there's always lots of little kids, and kids are just like tiny little drunk people. They walk funny, they talk funny, they say ridiculous things. And I think a lot of times I just go, oh, that's hilarious. And I write that in my book, and sometimes it ends up being a comic.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have no filter and also like kind of no ego to like worry about, what people think about what they're saying or what they're thinking.
Yeah.
I think childlike wonder is something that artists should kind of strive to have themselves.
Yeah, and they kids have this thing where it's like their mood and their personality is in everything they do. Even when you
Mm.
see a kid walk, they don't just walk like an adult. They either walk with purpose or they strut, or even if a kid is sad, you can tell just by the way they walk. I think that's
Hmm.
really cool.
Yeah, they wear their heart on their sleeves. It's
Yeah,
easy to read.
definitely. Yeah.
If you get like kind of a bigger idea that will take more than say 4 frames, does that overwhelm you, or like do you ever like kind of push the ones that might take more drawing per se? Do you kind of push them off ever, or do you kind of just you're like, all right, like I got this idea, I have to do it no matter how many frames it takes or how intricate of a drawing it is.
Yeah, I definitely think I push them and sort of think, oh, I don't want to make you. But then I eventually do. And I always show my ideas to Jordan first. And if I like it and he likes it, then it gets made. So sometimes I'll show him something and it's like 9 panels, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is going to take forever to draw. I hope he doesn't choose this one. And Jordan goes, oh, I like this one. And I look and he's
Hmm.
pointing to the one that's really long. And I'm like, oh, why? Why do you have to choose the really hard one? And but yeah, but I think once you get into that zone, when you're working on something and it's like you're not even aware of anything outside or time passing, then you just sort of can just do it.
A little bit about Jordan. What is that like to have a creative partner that you really trust that can, like you said, tell you the honest truth about what you're doing?
Oh, I think that's so helpful. I think otherwise I would just be so sort of involved in my own work that a lot of times I almost can't tell what is good and what isn't good anymore. When you look at
Hmm.
something for so long, it's like you just don't know.
You're numb to it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So to have someone else say, and because I trust him to always give me sort of his honest opinion as well. So for someone to say, this is good, this is not good, or this needs, more work, and we pretty much agree on everything. There'll be, the odd comic here and there that we don't agree on, but we sort of, can talk about it. And, if he likes it and I don't, he'll sort of tell me, oh, well, I like this comic because of this reason, or this face is hilarious, or whatever.
Hmm.
And usually one of us like comes around and agrees with the other person.
Gives in.
Yeah, gives in pretty much. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Patreon and how that kind of affects your work?
Yeah, so I joined Patreon, I think, last year. I didn't actually join it for a long time because Jordan actually listens to Pomplamoose, which is, I don't know how much you know about Patreon, but it was started by Jack Conte, and that's one of Jack's bands. So
Hmm.
Jordan told me about it quite early on, and I just thought, oh, well, that sounds kind of neat, but at the same time, um, I don't know. I have this sort of fear because my comics I've always made for me. Like I make them because I enjoy making them. That I thought that the idea of sort of now bringing money into it would sort of freeze me up and make me more likely to just pander to things that people want and not sort of do stuff that I want to do. And I was worried that, after each comic, I'd be checking my Patreon and seeing if I've got new pledges or less pledges, and it would just sort of drive me insane. Like kind of like a more serious version of like Google Analytics, which I used to check
Hmm.
obsessively, which I don't anymore, just because it's such a waste of time and it's bad for your mental health, I think. And
Yeah.
I
Check
was,
once a week, I
yeah,
think is the right play.
mm,
Once a week.
yeah. So I was worried that Patreon would be kind of the same, but now there's money involved. So, I I was worried that I'd then feel like I would always have to make comics of a certain kind, maybe, so that fans would like them and hopefully pay me. So
Hmm.
I sort of didn't do it for ages. And then eventually I just came around and decided I'll just do a small Patreon, because Patreon, you can have rewards like Kickstarter, but obviously they go on indefinitely instead of Kickstarter being a one-time campaign. So I thought I'll just start a Patreon. I'll just have 2 tiers, $1 or $5. And for $5, you get some behind the scenes stuff and some extra writing. I tried to do like a written post once a month, and sort of just put it up on my website and showed all my fans and just said, this is a thing now. If you want to support me, that's great, but you don't have to. The comic itself will always be free. So it's just, if you really like my work and you want to support me, feel free to support me on Patreon. And it's gone surprisingly well. And the fans are I think I found just the nicest people on the internet. They're just always so supportive and so kind and so nice. And so that's going really well. And I know that a couple of people at Patreon, some of the staff, read my comic, which is really awesome. And,
cool.
Yeah, and just recently I actually just did a wall mural for their office in San Francisco that sort of has their core behaviors on it. So I drew this big thing with little animals, and so that was really cool.
Is there an image of that we can link?
Yeah.
On the show notes?
I have photos. I didn't actually go.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely link them up in the show notes. yourcreativepush.com/Li, Li. By the way, I think Patreon is the best thing for artists, because people want to support you, and if you don't have a product, if you don't have you do have a book, or 3 books now, but if you don't have a product, and you just kind of, put stuff out for free and people are like, love it, they look at it every day, people want to support you. And I think Patreon's a great way for that platform, where
definitely
somebody who wants to, instead of buying a cup of coffee once a month, one of their cups of coffee a month, they can donate to you. And I support a lot of artists that I like, and a lot of the artists that have been on this show, and I'm going to be supporting you now that I know that you have Patreon. I just think it's a great format. But what does it do for you? Like, do you ever feel like you talked about it a little bit, but do you feel like pressure from that, where it's just like kind of there's no obligation on either end? Like, if you do like my work, you can support me, but do you still kind of feel that pressure to do something different, or do you still kind of try to stay true to yourself and your ideas and what originated Exocomics?
I think I'll always sort of have those fears in the back of my mind. I think if you're creating things to show people, you'll always have fears about, is this one good? Will people like it? But I think I do know rationally that at the end of the day, I just have to make stuff that I like, and making stuff that I want to make has gotten me here. And, it's a tried and true thing that to change now is just silly, sort of, the fans support me because they like my work already. So I try just to not think about the sort of money aspect. But Patreon is awesome. Like, the staff there are awesome. Like, just the platform is really easy and intuitive to use. I feel like it is really cool, and it just shows that sort of, I guess, that new sort of thinking where I think it's a hard thing to explain to my parents, because they see it as sort of like internet sort of busking.
Sure.
Yeah, but I like how there's like a new thing, sort of new way of thinking now, where if you make stuff and you put it on the internet, people who like it will just say, hey, I just like you doing the thing you do, so here's a bit of money to help support you. I think that's really, really cool.
And that's where we're going to leave off. We have a lot more fun stuff for you tomorrow with my conclusion with Li Chen, including a lot more stuff about Patreon, something that you should really think about using if you don't already. It's something that she certainly, and other artists that have been on the show, have kind of inspired me to start thinking about doing with this podcast. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for the rest of this interview. But hopefully today you're inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Thank you for listening, and thank you for doing your art. I love you, and we will catch you tomorrow. Bye.